The stillness of this late summer pasture bears no scars from the tragic event that took place years ago on a September morning in 1855. 600 U.S. Army troops attacked some 200 Sicangu Lakota camped along Blue Water Creek, a family village led by Chief Little Thunder. The assault was ordered in retaliation for the killing of Lieutenant John Groton and 29 soldiers a year earlier. A confrontation that began over a Mormon immigrant's lame cow and spiraled into violence. The raid began before sunrise. Within 2 hours, 86 men, women, and children lay dead. Survivors were taken captive, held as bargaining power in negotiations with the Great Sioux Nation. The September 3, 1855 attack was led by General William S. Harney, an Army officer whose brutality in the Second Seminole War earned him the title Indian Fighter. After the massacre at Blue Water, the Lakota gave him a new name, Woman Killer. As the dead lay scattered across the prairie, Lieutenant Governor K. Warren of the Corps of Topographical Engineers gathered the belongings of Chief Little Thunder's band, sparing some from General Harney's order to burn the camp. Recognizing their anthropological value, he worked until the evening selecting items and loading wagons. These objects became the earliest Plains Indian artifacts in the Smithsonian's collection and remained there for 170 years. This 250-year-old cottonwood stood on the prairie the day the Little Thunder camp was attacked. Today, it's known as a witness tree. Each September, the Sicangu Lakota gather here to pray on the anniversary of the massacre.
Very few of our family know about the massacre. My two greats-grandfather was the leader, chief. My one great-grandfather is the survivor of the Blue Water Massacre, and he is buried at home.
Karen Little Thunder is a member of the Sicangu Lakota and lives on the Rosebud Sioux Reservation in South Dakota. For years, she's worked to bring attention to the Blue Water Creek Massacre.
This has been so heavy and hard on my heart for so long, and then I meet people who say, well, that was in the history, what's it got to do with me? That was long ago. But truth is, that's, it's there. They don't. Education. I want to keep this about education, that's all.
While a student at Santa Gluska University, Karen learned of a book featuring Lakota artifacts in the Smithsonian. It turned out to be a record of the items Lieutenant Warren collected at the Blue Water Creek Massacre.
So the doll, to me, represents a little girl. This little doll, I just, on sight, became attached to it.
Since Karen first learned of what became of her relatives' belongings, the burden of that history has remained. But the story didn't end there.
My ancestor was General William Selby Harney, who committed the massacre of 86 Lakota people here at Blue Water.
More than a decade ago, Paul Soderman began reaching out to the Little Thunder family.
The Lakota concept of forgiveness is different than the English or the Western. I mean, there's some similarities, but it's an actual word called Wo-Kink Tuza.
People talked about Harney Peak and Black Hills and said, hey, I know somebody that's descendant of General Harney. Maybe he can do something about that mountain.
Over time, Paul Soderman formed a trusting friendship with Philip, Karen, and other Lakota tribal members. That relationship led to a united effort to rename Harney Peak in South Dakota. Today, the mountain bears the name Black Elk Peak, honoring a Lakota holy man.
We talked about other things and I always mentioned September 3rd. I said, why don't we just ask for that stuff back and bring it back?
We started drafting some documents, and I shared those with Paul and Kathy, and they made the adjustments and submitted them, and that was the ask.
The ask came as the Smithsonian adopted a new ethical collections policy, focused on how artifacts were acquired. Objects deemed to have been taken without consent, stolen, or obtained under duress would be returned to the rightful owners.
I was in disbelief for a very long time. It means that I am able to be in the presence of my relatives and my ancestors.
We call them Wo-Yu-Ha in Lakota language, sacred word. That means they're part of who they are.
Though the Little Thunder belongings were taken from Blue Water Creek in the aftermath of the massacre, their return was marked with dignity and long-awaited healing. Now, the ancestral belongings of Little Thunder's band are home again.
We did things collectively. We tried to get everybody involved, and the word we was always there.
It takes a long time to build the trust, but once you build that trust, you can move forward together. The Lakota word for it is taku waka shka shka. And what that means is something sacred is in motion here.
Looking now at what's happening, it's like I can breathe now.